Welcome back to another online history lesson. Today we'll be talking about the causes of World War I. If you remember back to last time, we were discussing U.S. imperialistic policies, and like the U.S., other countries were seeking to extend their empires, which was leading to tension in Europe.
Yeah, and President Woodrow Wilson, wanting to kind of get a gauge on that tension, would send his most trusted advisor, Colonel Edward House, over there in the spring of 1914 to kind of get a gauge on what was going on. And what House says back is pretty interesting. He says, everybody's nerves are tense. It needs only a spark to set the whole thing off. So let's take a look at why the nerves were tense and what that spark would be. Good. So as we know from studying other wars, there's really two types of causes, and we call that multiple causation. There's the long-term causes that happen over time that we also refer to as underlying causes. So let's take a look at those underlying causes that tells us why everyone's nerves were so tense.
This group of long-term causes can be given the acronym MAIN, M-A-I-N, not to be confused with the state Maine or the USS Maine, which was named after the state.
It has an E on the end.
Correct.
Unlike M-A-I-N. So let's look at what each one of these letters means. The first is the M, which stands for militarism. This is when a nation's armed forces are dominating a country's national policy. You start to really see a glorification of the military and war in general. And also at this time you see new weapons that these countries are starting to stockpile. And you know how that goes. If you're stockpiling weapons, you're eventually probably going to use them.
Perfect example is at this time Germany began building up its navy, which in turn caused Great Britain to build more ships and double the size of its army. Now let's look at the letter A. This stands for alliances. And during this time in Europe, countries began to align themselves with one another. The first alliance was known as the Triple Alliance, and it was made up of Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. The second was the Triple Entente, which was made up of Russia, France, and Britain.
If you remember, George Washington had warned us about entangling alliances in his farewell address, telling us to steer clear of them. And this will be one of the causes of World War I, so we get to see what Washington was talking about as far as alliances leading to war.
Correct. And if you look at this diagram and you take a look at the way everything's entangled with one another, it looks like one single action could set off all-out war.
And numerous countries being involved in that war just in a single action between two places.
Correct.
And, you know, there's all sorts of different types of alliances, and this type of alliance that we're talking about is a defense alliance, where you make an alliance to say, hey, if someone hurts you, we're going to come to your aid, that sort of thing. And that's what we'll see happen at the start of World War I. So now that we've talked about the M and the A, let's go on to the I, which stands for, as you guessed it, imperialism.
Imperialism!
That's right, all about empire building, which breeds lots of competition amongst these different countries, especially the European countries. They are competing over territories and colonies in other parts of the world. And that will lead to a tense relationships, or a bunch of tense relationships among different countries.
Yeah, and the countries that are being colonized, or the areas of the world that are being colonized right now, are Africa, Asia, and the Pacific Ocean between the major power players in Europe.
And Africa was the big one as far as leading to confrontations.
Yep. Rounding out the last letter of this acronym is the letter N, which stands for nationalism.
Man, with all these letters today, I feel like we're kind of hosting Sesame Street.
I know, I think I saw Bert and Ernie walk by the door there a second ago. Anyhow, back to nationalism. That's strict pride and devotion to one's nation.
And that will breed this idea within your country that you're the best, that you can take on anyone, and that you don't shy away from conflict because you think you will win that conflict. So now that we've talked about the underlying causes, or the long-term causes of World War I with the acronym MAIN, which stands for militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism, let's take a look at the immediate cause, or the point of no return. Or as Colonel Edward House said, the tensions were so high in Europe that it would take nothing but a single spark to set the whole thing off. Let's take a look at that event that provided that single spark.
Right, and that event occurred in June of 1914.
The 28th, I believe.
Correct. And at this time, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire was visiting Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia.
So wait, what's the name of this Archduke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire?
Was it? I believe it was Ferdinand. Was it Franz Ferdinand?
Yeah, Franz Ferdinand. You mean the band?
No, not the band.
The band's named after him.
Yes, correct. So as he's taking a trip through the capital of Sarajevo with his wife in an open-topped car, he runs into some individuals from the members of the Black Hand.
7 of them to be exact, all equipped with different things. They had grenades, and they had, what else? A cyanide capsule, which they were supposed to, as soon as they threw their grenade, take the cyanide and jump in the river, and then they would die. The problem is that the ones who actually took the cyanide capsule just made them sick. The capsule was outdated. It didn't kill them. So when they jumped in the river, by the way, the river's only 4 inches deep, so that did a whole lot of good, and one of them would be dragged by the river and arrested. But anyways, so they throw the grenade at the car, one of these 7, and it rolls off the car, and the driver quickly speeds up. It blows up, and it does injure some folks in back, some policemen and other security members. It is at this point that Franz Ferdinand and Sophie agree to continue with what they had planned, and they go forward and they go on this trip and they have this reception. But as the reception's coming to a close, Franz wants to go visit the people that were injured in the explosion. So the driver takes him there, but the driver made a wrong turn. And ironically enough, the street that he turned down was Franz Joseph Street, named after Archduke Franz Ferdinand's father.
Correct, and really that one wrong turn altered the course of history forever.
Forever. Because when he turns down that street, one of those assassins who had given up earlier was Gavrilo Princip, who was standing at a cafe when he sees the car drive by. But then, realizing they made the wrong turn, the car starts to back up and stops to shift gears, and kind of the gears get jammed up. Princip pulls out a gun and shoots point blank about 5 feet away, the first shot hitting Sophie, and the second shot hitting the Archduke himself. While dying, he said something to the effect of, "No, no, my dear Sophie, you must stay alive for the children." Gavrilo Princip will be arrested. He'll be put on trial along with the other co-conspirators, and he will die a few years later in prison.
The assassination then triggers the alliance system to take effect. Once the Archduke was assassinated or killed, Austria-Hungary blames Serbia and immediately declares war.
Then, Russia, coming to the aid of Serbia, will start to mobilize their troops. And Germany doesn't like this very much, as they are in an alliance with Austria-Hungary, will ask Russia to stop their mobilization. When they don't, Germany declares war on Russia. And soon, the other countries of Europe will get entangled into this with their defense alliances, and soon you have all of Europe engulfed in a war, as America watches from afar, hoping to stay out. Once these alliances really take effect, most of Europe is divided into 2 camps. The Allied powers, consisting of Russia, France, and Britain, and the Central powers, consisting of Italy, Austria-Hungary, and Germany. At this time, remember, America's trying to stay neutral. They're trying to keep out of this war. They don't want to get entangled into other people's problems.
So neutral, they're not involved at all.
In theory, they're not involved. They haven't declared war on anyone, and no one's declared war on them.
Is it really possible for when a war of this size is going on anywhere on the globe, is it really possible for a country to stay completely out of all of this?
Well, especially a country that has the economic entanglements like the United States.
Yeah.
We'll explore that question more next time.
Sounds good.
We'll talk to you next time. Have a good one. Goodbye.
And see you later.
Booyakasha!